I'm going to go ahead and call this March 4th, 2019 meeting of the Whitefish City Council to order. Thanks everyone for coming this evening. Leo, would you please lead us in the pledge tonight? Thanks very much, Leo. We'll move on to our communications from the public. We do have one public hearing scheduled for this evening, so if you're here to speak on item 6A, please hold your comments until I call that individual public hearing. If you have anything at this time to present to the City Council, issues, concerns, now would be your time, or anything else on the agenda for that matter. For the record, your name and address, please, when you approach the podium. Any public comment tonight? Public comment? Not seeing any. I'll stay with the audience. Any volunteer board reports from the audience? Not seeing any. How about the council? No board reports, which brings us quickly onto our consent agenda. Item 5, any changes or additions to the February 19th meeting minutes, or can I have a motion for approval, please?
Mr. Mayor, I would move to approve the consent agenda as presented.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councillor Williams. Any further discussion on the motion? All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that motion does carry unanimously. And we're quickly on to our one public hearing tonight, which is item 6A, consideration of a request from FBN Investments LLC for a preliminary plat for 12-lot subdivision on 1.174 acres located at 450 Colorado Avenue. The property is zoned WR3, which is our low-density multifamily residential district, and the Whitefish Growth Policy designates the property as high-density residential. Bailey.
Okay, good evening. So the applicant is proposing a 12-lot residential subdivision. It's a total of 1.174 acres. It's a mixture of 10 townhome lots and 2 single-family lots. Gross density of the subdivision is 10.22 dwelling units per acre. The lots range in size from a little over 2,600 square feet gross to about 6,316 square feet gross, and actually my numbers are a little off, but I'll get into that in a minute. The majority of the lots will each have frontage either along Colorado Avenue or Denver Street, both city-maintained roads. They will be accessed from an internal, privately maintained dead end, similar to an alley. One of the single-family lots would have no frontage along either public streets, and instead would only be accessed from the private internal roadway. The subdivision would be required to pay cash in lieu of a parkland dedication, and they are not requesting any subdivision variances. So the property is located at 540 Colorado Avenue. It's in the southwest corner of Colorado Avenue and Denver Street, just to put that kind of in your mind. It is currently vacant and is zoned WR3, which is our low-density multifamily residential district. It's surrounded by residential uses on the north, south, east, and then the west is currently a vacant lot between this property, and then Bonsai's parking lot would be further to the west. The zoning around it are a mixture of WR2 to WR3, and then some WB1 directly to the west as well. We did mail a notice to the adjacent landowners within 300 feet of the subject parcel, since this is a major subdivision, and that was on January 29th. We also placed a sign on the property, noticed advisory agencies on February 1st, and published a legal in the pilot on February 6th. When I wrote the staff report, I had 1 public comment that had been received, and then 2 additional comments were submitted prior to the planning board meeting, and those were included in the council packet that you all received as well. But I've had no additional comments submitted since that time. So the review criteria, the fire marshal has reviewed the project for conformance with the city's fire codes. Location of existing hydrants in the area are adequate at this time, and so no additional hydrants are being required. The private access road is required to be a 24-foot wide easement with a paved 20-foot wide drivable surface and a hammerhead turnaround installed that would be compliant with current fire codes. Additionally, the 20-foot surface must be maintained in all seasons to allow for emergency access. And this is a note that we have included in the conditions to be put in their CC&Rs, as well as just noted as well for the plat. The internal road would function similar to a paved alley. No individual driveways would be accessing directly onto either Denver Street or Colorado Avenue. Frontage improvements already exist along Colorado Avenue, and no frontage improvements are being required along Denver Street, since this road is located on the city's reconstruction priority list and would be most likely completed within the next 5 to 6 years. The applicant will be required to pay cash in lieu of sidewalks, however, along Denver Street. There is an existing driveway approach along Colorado Avenue that will be required to be removed and revegetated. And with the removal of the driveway, there may be a requirement for a new street tree within the boulevard in that area. So we do have a condition that the applicant coordinate with the Parks Department for any new street tree installation that may be needed with that spacing. Colorado Avenue does have a shared bike and pedestrian path along the west side of the property that is currently in existence. There were some initial subdivision designs that were submitted to staff that depicted the internal access road actually coming out back onto Colorado and crossing that bike pedestrian path. And we ended up we identified some safety concerns, obviously, with that access and traffic entering and exiting from both directions very close to the intersection, as well as pedestrian safety. And so we recommended that it just be a regular dead end with a hammerhead. And the fire marshal did agree with that as well. So. There are no mapped crucial wildlife habitat or seasonal migration corridors on the site that we know of. The lots do provide a transitional area between the higher density commercials along Wisconsin and the larger rural lots out towards Texas Avenue and further east of the property. This area of town is known for having high groundwater, but it does depend on specific property locations in this area of town. They are currently doing groundwater monitoring, but it has not completed prior to the application submittal. There was this property has been available for a number of years, so there's been some previous groundwater monitoring as well that we didn't have available. So we are conditioning that the results, it would be a condition of approval to do complete the groundwater monitoring, as the results could impact any proposed stormwater management and the overall design of the project as well. We do have a condition that states if they don't complete groundwater monitoring, they can assume that it is within 6 feet and base their models on that assumption that they do have high groundwater, and that would also be a note on the face of the plat that we don't allow crawl spaces or basements in that situation. The proposed private access road alone equals over 5,000 square feet, so they are going to be required to submit an engineered stormwater management plan. They have begun working with an engineer to design their stormwater detention area, and that would be located in the common area that's south of the proposed Lot 2, and you can see it on their revised plan. Final design would occur after the preliminary plat is approved by council, and then the installation would be required prior to an application for a final plat. City water is currently located within Denver Street and Colorado Avenue right-of-ways. The 10 lots along Colorado Avenue would each have an individual water service line. Actually, you can see it on the plan there, the blue lines, that would extend from the existing water main on Colorado. And then the 2 single-family lots would have service lines that would be extended from Denver Street's water main. And we are requiring that an easement be located on the face of the plat for any service lines that cross individual property lines, and that's a standard requirement. The project does propose to connect to the existing sewer system that's located within Denver Street. They would actually be extending a private sewer main within their 24-foot wide private access and utility easement, the road, and then individual service lines would be extended to each lot from that private sewer main. And all facilities will be designed and constructed to city specifications and require approval from the Public Works Department prior to installation. As I mentioned, the proposed subdivision is required to provide parkland dedication. Since the lots are less than half an acre in size, the calculation is 11% of the net acreage of the subdivision. Based on my calculations, they'd be required to provide 4,767.642 square feet for parkland dedication. And that number is based off of the land value at the time of final plat. So the actual amount may vary depending on years and what their appraised value of the land is, but the amount that they're required would be the same. Since the parkland would be less than 1 acre in size, the park board would like that as cash in lieu. Additionally, there are a number of large mature trees on the property, and we are requiring or proposing a condition of a tree retention preservation plan be submitted and then also included within their CC&Rs for long-term maintenance and preservation of some of those larger trees on the property, the ones that aren't within building envelopes. So the growth policy does identify the property as high-density residential on our future land use map. The property is zoned, as I said, WR3, which does comply with that growth policy designation. The zoning WR3 does permit the creation of sublots. We do have specific standards within our Chapter 3, our special provision for the creation of sublots, and the proposed plat does comply with those standards. When I was doing my research and looking into all the definitions of things within our subdivision and zoning regulations, I found out that the definition of lot area in both the zoning and the subdivision regulations does state that street easements are not included within the total lot area. So therefore, at the time of my report, there were the 2 single-family lots and 2 sublots that actually were less than the minimum lot size requirements. Since that time, the applicant has revised their subdivision plan. They submitted a revised one, and that was included on page 98 of your packet. It's the very, very last page of my packet. But we still do have a condition of approval that we are proposing that just says all the proposed lots must comply with the minimum square footage requirements for either the single family or the townhouse. And that would be confirmed at the time of final plat. So it does appear that they're compliant at this stage, but I'm still recommending that condition stay on there just for everyone's reference. So.
What condition was that, Bailey?
It is, hold on a second. It was condition number 14.
14, okay,
Yeah,
thanks.
yep. So staff recommended approval of the application with 20 conditions. Staff is still recommending approval of the preliminary plat with still the same conditions of approval and the submitted revised preliminary plat application that does meet the required lot areas. The planning board held a meeting on February 21st of 2019 to consider the request. The applicant was present at that meeting to discuss his project and answer questions. There were also 4 members of the public that were in attendance at that meeting, and those draft minutes are attached as part of your packet for you to read. So following the hearing, the planning board did recommend denial of the application, or unanimously, 6-0. And that was based on the plat that was submitted did not meet the minimum lot size standards in the R3 zoning. And so they did propose 2 revised findings, findings 7 and finding 8, to support their denial of the application. And I would just like to note that it's not uncommon for lot lines to shift between preliminary plat and final plat. In fact, we actually, number one, we always put a condition, a standard condition on all of the subdivisions. In this case, it's condition number 4 is what it just happens to be. But it just does say that when they're reviewing the engineering plans, that the applicant is aware that that alone, just reviewing and approval of engineering and stormwater and water, sewer, all that kind of stuff, can require lot lines to be moved or changed or require the removal or deletion of a lot. So we always put that on, that just because council approves it doesn't always mean that they can get the engineering to pencil out and fix that way as well. And then also we do have a section within our final plat standards in our subdivision regulations that does allow some minimal changes to be made between preliminary plat and final plat. And one of those is that the reconfiguration of 5 lots or less, and actually the deletion of a lot. And so those don't require going back to planning board. So just kind of make a note, we don't always see it, but it's not uncommon that something of that nature could be dealt with. So I'm happy to answer questions. The applicant was not able to make the meeting, but his technical representative or his engineer, Brent Foley, is here. If you guys have questions as well, he can help answer those.
Thanks, Bailey. Any questions for Bailey on her staff report? Frank?
Yeah, there we go. Bailey, question for you. I mean, I understand what happened at the planning board. Its denial was primarily based on the fact that the plat wasn't accurate. That's been corrected based on what you're telling us today. So those reservations would go away. The second question I've got for you is, why is your tree area preservation condition, which I think is 9, why doesn't it require that the tree preservation plan be submitted prior to groundbreaking? That seems to me to be a more appropriate time for something like that to be submitted.
I mean, we could have it. I know typically it just comes, because they're usually doing their CC&Rs, come in with their final plat application. Usually that's just our standard. I mean, it could be done prior to any groundbreaking. I think that's a great suggestion as well.
Great. Thanks.
Yeah.
Okay.
Further questions for Bailey? Thanks, Bailey.
Okay.
Not seeing any, we did advertise for a public hearing on item 6A for a preliminary plat for a 12-lot subdivision on 1.174 acres located at 450 Colorado Avenue. Brent is the applicant's representative. Do you have anything addition to add tonight? Just name and address for the record, please.
My name is Brent Foley with Foley Engineering at 26 Village Loop in Kalispell. And we thank you guys for your consideration of this application. Obviously, there was some misunderstanding at the planning board meeting, and I appreciate you guys allowing us to fix that. A large part of that common area there was allowed with the intent that we would just fit all the stormwater in that one corner, not realizing that that actually took out some of our overall net area, those other lots. And so, as you can see on this one now, although the common area has decreased, we still are able to use the same area for stormwater in that southwestern corner. And stormwater easements don't count against the net area of those lots. And so we should, everything we evaluated, did preliminary hydrology on this, evaluated pond sizing and things, and this should fit very well with this current configuration here. And did you guys have any questions for me? I wanted to give you that opportunity.
Thanks, Brent. Any questions for the applicant's representative, Brent? Not seeing any right now, Brent.
Thank you, guys.
They might come up later. Thanks. Any public comment tonight on this item? Leo?
Leo Keene, 514 Pine Place. And this is the first chance I've had to see the plan here. I have a couple concerns. Not a neighbor, but still a resident of Whitefish. And I'm concerned about our loss of trees again, as I've spoken before to the council. And I really have to say that the possibility of tree retention on this site is not there. it looks to me like everything is built. I don't see, and if you've looked at the property, there are a lot of big Douglas fir on that property. How they would be retained or retention is a little pie in the sky, I guess I'd have to say. Possibly street trees to replace some that are taken, and it was mentioned that one street tree doesn't seem very realistic for what we're losing. It's high density, and that means that everything goes on the property. And I'm also very concerned about this council has approved a lot of high density developments on Wisconsin Avenue and throughout town. And I think we're reaching a point where we have to start thinking about what kind of town we want. I think we're losing a lot of the character of our town when we bring in so many high-density projects, such as the quarry across the street, which is going to have a huge impact on Wisconsin Avenue. And I think this will too. It'll have an impact on Wisconsin. And I just think we're kind of shooting ourselves in the foot by approving project after project after project of high density when those of us who live here are going to be the ones who end up not enjoying our town quite as much as we used to due to traffic and due to the loss of character. It's a little awkward because Brent was the engineer for our little project on Iowa Pines, so I would love to see the engineer and the developer go back to work and maybe do something that's a little more appropriate for the neighborhood, maybe appropriate for the town, and certainly possible to save a lot more trees. I don't see how any are going to be saved here. And hopefully they could be replaced if that was a condition. But thanks for letting me speak.
Thanks very much, Leo. Further public comment tonight on this item? Further public testimony? Not seeing any, I'll go ahead and close the public hearing and turn it back to the council for discussion or a motion to get us started. Andy.
I would move to approve WPP 18-16, adopting the findings of fact, staff report, and then striking the 2 amendments to findings 7 and 8 as transmitted by the planning board.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Andy, would you like to speak to your motion?
Yeah, first of all, I'd like to make an amendment.
Okay.
That amendment would be to condition number 13. That would be to basically strike all language there. And starting over, and under condition 13 would be a requirement to construct the sidewalk on Denver Street. If I get a second, I'll speak to that.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment, which will be an amendment to condition number 13?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Sweeney. Andy.
The only rationale Craig gave for not having sidewalks constructed on Denver was the fact that it's going to be rebuilt in 6 years. Well, 6 years is a long time in my opinion. And what I'm really concerned about by not having a sidewalk there is the fact that all of the traffic from that subdivision is going to come and go out of that one entrance and one exit, and that goes on to Denver Street. And I think without having a formalized pedestrian crossing there, just knowing the number of people that use that street in the summer, whether going to or from the brewery or the other high-density housing that's in the area and people coming up and taking a left and walking down Denver, without having for a decent pedestrian crossing across that entrance and exit for 6 years, I think is just, that doesn't fly for me in any way, shape, or form. And my concern is then too, is we're not going to get really a whole lot of money out of it, and then that money's going to sit, and we're going to be a lot better off having a sidewalk there for the next 6 years. If it gets ripped up when the street gets rebuilt, then so be it. But I think we need sidewalk there.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Question related to that friendly amendment before we either have a discussion on it or a vote. The property located between this subject property and Bonsai, I believe there's 2 lots, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct, Bailey?
So you have, going from Wisconsin, you have the building that Bonsai is on.
Correct.
Then you have a lot that's their parking lot or kind of extended parking lot. Then you have another property that actually will be coming in March. They're developing that or proposing to develop that with a professional office building. And then you have this property.
So theoretically, if we were to require the developer to build this section of sidewalk, we're literally missing the gap between this.
Wisconsin all the way other into
Just
this
past
property.
Bonsai.
Yeah. Yep.
Okay. I completely agree with Frank, or Andy's friendly amendment, and I actually just took a look at the city budget, and I believe there's over $72,000 available in the North Sidewalk District Fund. So hopefully that could be a source of some revenue to help with some sidewalk improvements in addition to what perhaps the developer is going to be paying for if this motion does pass. Any further comments on the friendly amendment? All those in favor, please raise your hand on the amendment. And that passes unanimously, which brings us back to the original motion as amended. Any further comments? Andy?
I guess just a couple comments, and I'll make a couple references to Leo's comments, I guess. And while I do agree with him, and I think that tree retention there is going to be difficult, but this is a good natural area for infill, and we have a lot of very similar housing types around it. But one of the problems we face as a city when we're looking at something like this, whether we're approving or denying it, is we don't have a lot of tools for denial on something that basically meets all of the zoning requirements and is allowed by the zoning requirements. Thanks to the 1995 legislature, we lost basically all of the subjective things that we could look at a subdivision with. We no longer have those. We have the objective criteria in our laws, and that's pretty much it. And while as a community we may like to say, it's like, well, we'd really rather see, we just don't have the tools to make that happen anymore, unfortunately. And I think that we kind of find ourselves at times approving things that none of us necessarily want, but we just don't have the ability to say no a lot of times. So anyway.
Thanks, Andy. Frank?
I would like to offer an amendment as well.
You're on.
I'm on. See, I'm on. I'm good.
A little closer.
A little close. I would like to offer an amendment to what is, condition number 11. I think condition number 11 should read effectively that a tree preservation plan must be submitted prior to any groundbreaking activities. Any replacement trees must remain healthy for not less than 5 years. If they fail to remain healthy for 5 years, they shall be replaced by the HOA, and the timeline for such replaced trees shall similarly remain healthy for 5 years.
Is there a second to the friendly amendment, which will be to condition number 11?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Fury. Is everyone clear with the amendment? We'll vote on the amendment to condition number 11. All those in favor, please raise your hand. Those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously. Any additional amendments to the conditions of approval? Not seeing any, that'll take us back to the original motion, which is to approve the preliminary plat with amendments to condition number 13, as well as condition number 11. All those in favor, please raise your hand. And those opposed, like sign, and that carries unanimously as well, Michelle. Thanks for coming tonight, Brett. We will move on to item 7A, which is consideration of our own ordinance, which will be ordinance 19-6, an ordinance of the City Council, amending Title 7, Chapter 3, Section 3, subsections B1, B2, and B4 regarding animal restrictions of the Whitefish City Code, and this will be on a first reading. Maria.
Good evening. So this is to do a little bit of tidying up of the code in order to represent the historic use of the Hugh Rogers Wag Park. My staff report is on page 102 of the packet. This code, 7-3-3 animal restrictions, is 113 years old, and it reflects the historic restrictions that we've had on animals in parks and near public bodies of water. But it has never really been updated to reflect the uniqueness of the dog park. And so staff does recommend updating the language to read as follows: 7-3-3B, animals at large. Number 1, that no owner, keeper, attendant, or harborer of any dog, and then it lists livestock and fowl, or any like animal shall allow this animal in or upon the premises known as City Beach and the park area of Whitefish. Updating the language to say accepting here from service animals. This is just to update the language from the previous seeing eye dogs or dogs for the hearing impaired. Number 2, no owner, keeper, attendant, or harborer of any dog, and then livestock or fowl, or like animal, shall allow or permit any such animal to go into any lake or waters of any public park, adding there, with the exception of dogs at designated dog parks. And we left it dog parks so that in the future, if we have more than one, we don't have to update the language again. And then number 4, no owner, keeper, attendant, or harborer of any dog, livestock, fowl, or like animal shall allow or permit any such animal in or upon any public park within the city during any organized athletic event or special event authorized or permitted by the city. Adding, excepting here from service animals, and adding, with the exception of dogs at designated dog parks. I brought this before the park board during the February meeting, and they unanimously recommended that the council approve these changes to the code. There's no financial requirement for this revision, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Thanks, Maria. Any questions for Maria? Melissa?
I noticed that, so it mentions, seeing eye dogs and dogs for the hearing impaired as exemptions. I'm just wondering about therapy animals. Not that I would necessarily want to have that included, but I wasn't sure if that was excluded, if that presents any, I don't know, legal jeopardy to the city, or?
The language states accepting here from service animals, and so I believe that there then encompasses any justified service animal as according to the law, as the law provides for.
Okay. Then the other question was so that they're not permitted to go into any lake or waters of any public park. So I just think about like Riverside Park, like these waters here, and I know tons of dogs swim in those waters. So how does that square with the language in the?
So it says, yes, that they are not permitted to go into any lake or waters of any public park. The river is not a public park. It's a separate body of water. And so it only identifies the lake and the public park. I don't believe, and I would have to ask Angie, I don't think we have jurisdiction over the river. And so I don't think that we can prohibit dogs going into the river.
Good.
Okay, so even though the river is going through the park, it's not considered part of the park.
That's right.
Okay, thank you for clarifying.
Glad to hear that. That's where I trained my yellow lab. In Riverside Park. I really wanted to hear you reference mules, swine, sheep, and goat, but you did not. With that said, any additional questions for Maria on her staff report?
Just one.
Eddie.
Maria, I know originally at the south buttress of the Sky Park Bridge, there'd been some discussion of having that as an access point for dogs for free swimming on the river. Did that ever come to pass?
It's not a developed area for that type of access, but again, it's the river, and so we don't have jurisdiction over that, so this wouldn't prohibit dogs from going into the river from that point.
Okay. Because just hearing John, and I know I had a number of labs I've trained out of Riverside Park too, and I live on the water, so my dog gets to swim every day, but I think it would be my suggestion to have the park board maybe take a look at somewhere where we could have some access for dogs out of a park into the river, because there's a lot of dogs, and when it's hot in the summer, people do like to take their dogs swimming, and the dog park's great, but it's a little different than swimming in the river, quite frankly. It's a small pond. And I mean, I think that it's something you would find pretty broad support for in this community. And when I first read through this and I'm like, oh, no animals in the water anywhere out of any city park, I'm like, well, that's kind of a little restrictive in my opinion. But anyway, for a topic of discussion at the park board, and I could come in public comment or something and ask about that too possibly, so.
I don't think, and I would have to just ask, clarify this with Angie and Chief Dial, but I don't think that that is prohibited at this time. This doesn't say that you can't have your dog in a public park. You can have your dog in the public park. And it doesn't prohibit you from accessing the river. So I don't think that there is actually a problem with dogs accessing the river from a public park.
Great. Further questions, comments? We'll need a motion on a first reading. Frank?
I got turned off there for a second. I don't want to talk anymore. I would move to approve ordinance 19-6, an ordinance of the City Council amending Title 7, Chapter 3, Section 3, subsections B1, B2, and B4, animal restrictions of the City Whitefish Code, first reading.
Is there a second to the motion?
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Williams. Further discussion? All those in favor, please raise your hand, and those opposed, like sign, and that motion carries unanimously. Thanks, Maria.
Thank you.
You have Adam's written report and close with the packet. Any questions of our city manager from the council? Any questions on the written reports? Adam, anything addition to report on between February 27 and March 4th?
No, but I do have a couple of things to add.
Great.
We have decided on a meeting with developers and lenders. That will be this Thursday at 3:30 p.m. right here in this room. We probably will notice the meeting just kind of with a little caveat at the bottom saying that there may be a quorum of, you know, who knows, city council, planning board, steering committee that might be here. You're welcome to come, and I mean, it's not a necessity, but at the same time, I know there's a lot of, with the inclusionary zoning, we're getting a lot of flack from developers, and so we're trying to take another opportunity to explain the program, maybe do some in-depth things. I know a few things have changed from the last time developers were shown the program, so we want to cover some of those items, so that'll happen this Thursday, 3:30. Also, I wanted to note that on the upcoming work and special sessions, I did go out quite a ways because I wanted to get the couple of budget meetings on there so you can be planning ahead for that. May is typically a pretty big month for us, and I know last year, just because of everything that we had going on, we needed more work session time, so we moved the committee interviews from the first and third Monday to the second Monday. So I think that, I can't remember what date that was last year, but we put all the committees there so that we could free up room for the first and third for work sessions. That was great, everyone was fine with that, but when it got to the end of May and we were meeting every single Monday, I think it got to be a little much. That was kind of shared with us, but I will say things are busy. There are 13 items on Architectural Review Committee tomorrow. Just so you know, I won't plan on holding a meeting maybe that second Monday in May, but if we need some more work session time, we may need to do something to try to fit all of this work into. So just so you know that may be coming down the pike.
But definitely May 6th.
Definitely May
Plan on
6th,
that. Okay.
definitely May 20th. So the first and third, as always, but if things really start to get busy and we really need some work session time, we may have to do what we did again last year.
Okay. For the lender and developer working group meeting or presentation on Thursday, how many lenders and developers do you anticipate attending? How did we outreach to the community, et cetera?
So we have an email list that Wendy put together of lenders and developers. I think that's over like 70 emails. So we sent it out to all of them, and hopefully we didn't miss anyone. We kind of put a caveat in there that if you know of someone that isn't on the list, please get it to them. We anticipated from the first time that we did it, we had about 15 people here. We thought we might have 20 or so. Based on the last several days of discussions and meetings that I have had, there's a lot of interest. And I think quite a few people might be coming out. I know we were kind of thinking about doing the room in just kind of one circle of tables so that we can have more of a collaborative discussion, but I'm not sure we'll be able to fit that number of people here. So there could be 30, 40 people here, but then again, who knows, might just be 22, but.
Okay. Great, thanks, Adam.
Yep.
We'll move on to item 9, which is communications from the mayor and city council, and we'll start this evening with Andy. Thanks, Andy. Ryan.
Yeah, I was talking to Richard, and he said he couldn't be here tonight, and he wanted me to gauge the council's interest on submitting a letter to MDOT requesting, let's see, he said fishing access at the Highway 40 bridge, along with a bike ped trail connecting the access with the shared path on 93. He had said to me the bike path would allow bike shuttle for those that float the river. He did say that the bike ped committee was going to send a letter along as well if the council thought that one would be appropriate.
Familiar with this topic to some degree. I'll let Maria chime in as needed, but I was actually contacted by an employee of Montana Fish, Wildlife, and Parks who works closely with the Stream Permitting Act, which does all the permitting for DOT, and he made me aware of the fact that currently DOT has no plans to basically memorialize or provide for that kind of that dispersed, boat launch area right now on the northwest corner of the Highway 40 bridge in 93. But he also indicated that FWP would be very supportive of perhaps asking DOT to provide that as part of the highway, reconstruction project. So I'm certainly supportive of that, given our, recent efforts with the river. Maria, do you have anything to add? I'd be happy to help draft a letter, co-sign a letter, whatever you feel is appropriate.
The only thing that I would add is that the Bike Ped Committee was not able to meet today. They didn't have a quorum, but there was an email that was sent out updating them and encouraging if as individuals they felt that they would like to send a letter, they could do so. And so I believe that you'll have individuals from the Bike Ped Committee who will be sending letters encouraging for the bike path as well as the fishing access site.
Okay. I think it would be appropriate for the city to formally comment. I'd be willing to draft that letter or with some help from city staff, if that's okay, and sign on behalf of the council, if that's the council's direction tonight related to that project. Yes. I think time is of the essence, and we should probably get in front of DOT earlier than later, is my opinion. So I saw some head nods. I'll maybe circle back with you, Maria, and start working on a letter that we can submit on behalf of the city. Great. Thanks, Ryan. And thanks, Richard, wherever he may be. Katie.
No comment.
Thanks, Katie. Frank.
Yeah, I had a request from.
I did not this time.
There you go. I had a inquiry from one of our citizens about traffic congestion, particularly with the berms of snow that are on 93 North. Basically, I'll say from Baker, Wisconsin to the river in particular. There was an observation of people trying to get out of a car with very heavy traffic, including large logging trucks coming through, and there was, at least they expressed some concern that it was pretty dangerous, given how narrow the streets have become for parking when you have large volumes of large trucks going through there, as we do. Have we ever considered or looked at possibly restricting parking on that section of 93 to one side or the other during the winter months where we have those problems, where we've got the road essentially narrowing with those berms on each side, then you add the cars, and it just makes it kind of dangerous. Has anybody looked at that? As I know it's probably something for Craig, but I just think we probably ought to look at that as a general proposition. I know people will squawk about a loss of parking down there, but maybe if we restricted it to the winter months. Have you observed anything, Chief Dial?
I didn't think parking was.
I'm not quite sure what you're talking about, Frank.
Basically going westbound on 93 north, or northbound, whatever, from downtown Wisconsin to the river. along Second Street.
On West Second?
Yeah.
Okay, all right. It's something we can look at. I'll talk to Craig about it. I've really never got anybody complaining about it, or.
Yeah, I had a couple of people tell me about it, and it was somebody who's lived here a long time, and they just observed this, and they said, you know, you at least ought to raise the issue because it was pretty dangerous.
You know, it's just something to think about. We were talking a little bit earlier before the council meeting started. There is a lot of parking issues down there because we've got all that new development with the condos and stuff. So, and we got people, you know, parking on O'Brien, a Lupfer. So that would just add a little bit more problem to the parking. But I'll talk to Craig and we'll get back to you about it.
Thanks. Anyway, I just thought I'd raise it.
Thanks, Frank. Anything further?
No comments.
Melissa? Nope, okay. So we should probably discuss the work session topic. So we reviewed for the public's benefit a draft ordinance that would essentially ban fireworks with the exception of the public display that the city and the Chamber of Commerce hosts each July 4th at City Beach. So I don't think we were able to deliberate after we went to public comment during the work session, so I think we should give this a little bit of work this evening, given the fact that it's only a couple minutes to 8. Anyone have any comments on the work session tonight? Direction, thoughts? Melissa?
I was just going to express some conflict about it because on one hand, you know, it's a nuisance, you know, there's safety issues, the noise is, you know, can be at times out of control. But at the same time, I just, you know, does it rise to the level of like banning them altogether as far as, with the exception of permitted uses? You know, while this stage of my life, I have no interest in participating in fireworks displays or, you know, I can appreciate that these are family traditions that people have and are part of family traditions that people have. And so I don't know if anybody else has experiencing some of that same conflict about it, but I just, you know, I do. And, you know, if we do pass or revise the ordinance, is it really going to do much to address some of the concerns that we have? You know, is it going to be really an effective tool? Is it going to change much? And, you know, maybe not, but I just thought I would open the discussion with some of my ambivalence.
Thanks, Melissa.
I liked what Missoula did, where they carved out the portion for novelty items, because it seemed like the emails we got talked about taking it out of the hands of children and the small things they like, you know, like the snakes and the sparklers. So I think I would be more willing to support something that still allowed for kids to use things like sparklers and the little snakes that don't make any noise and they're just kind of expand on the sidewalk. You know, I remember being a kid and loving playing with sparklers with my cousins and brother, but, you know, I also remember almost blowing my hand off numerous times when I became a teenager. So I think that the smaller ones, sparklers and things of that nature, we should keep them around. But other than that, I wouldn't have a problem banning the Dago bombs and big things like that.
I certainly wouldn't object to banning Dago bombs.
John, I kind of spoke my piece earlier. I do feel a little bit of ambivalence in terms of the effectiveness. I think there might be some room for us to lead here, and I think that by restricting it, I would be certainly happy to restrict and eliminate Dago bombs of any kind. Go with more a silent approach to our fireworks to the extent we're going to have them. But I would also entertain, I don't want to ban them all except the one at City Park. I think permitted, restricted types of fireworks displays would be fine with me as long as they were professionally managed. I mean, I appreciate that there are family traditions and there are kids, but as Ryan pointed out, and I can say for sure, notwithstanding Cole Abel's comments earlier this evening, I was one of those kids that almost lost my hand, and I almost lost a friend of mine, their leg, by one of these things going off. And so, and that was in a supervised arena. We were standing literally in a supervised arena with my father standing right there. If he had not grabbed that thing when he did, that Roman candle would have gone straight off into that kid's leg. And I know the manufacturing techniques are theoretically better, but I think the public safety aspects of the private operations of those kinds of fireworks, it just doesn't warrant the risk. I don't want us to be in a position a year from now, 6 months, or 2 years from now, if we don't do something, that we end up with a situation much like we did with a dog bite in the farmer's market last year. It was a horrible, horrible thing. We probably should have banned them earlier, and we had the right to do so. But we don't want to be in that position again, I don't think. And I think that's where that's the road we're heading down if we don't at least begin to address that.
Thanks, Frank. During the work session, Angie, at the beginning, you indicated that you had some suggestions or perhaps some alternative considerations for us to think about. And I don't believe you had the opportunity to share those in our work session, or did you? I just wanted to make sure that you and Chief Dial in particular had ample opportunity to give us your professional, recommendation on how to proceed here.
I mean, I think I pretty much shared them. Again, as Ryan mentioned, Missoula bans everything except for novelties, and that gives kids an opportunity to do, a limited amount of fireworks during certain hours, during, certain days. If you guys wanted to continue to allow professional shows without some of the explosive sound effects, I think that's one way to go. I think a lot of the public comment that we heard, not tonight, but in the past, has been when either the lodge or whomever the lodge has permitted to have a wedding there does professional displays above the water, it tends to travel. So I think you could consider that. I think you could consider, banning them except for maybe on the 4th during some very limited hours. So I mean, those I think are all alternatives to a full-out ban. Again, I have no opinion or real sense of what a full-out ban would prevent. I tend to agree with Chief Dial that people are going to do what they are going to do, and we don't really have the police manpower. I think their time is probably better spent, arresting drunks than they are trying to track down people who are setting off fireworks. Yep. So I really don't have a one opinion. I mean, I guess the only strong opinion I would have is, if you're going to permit public displays to alleviate some of the concerns about PTSD, about keeping people awake, is maybe to, I don't know that we need to write it in the ordinance, but maybe just ban those concussive sounds that really tend to disturb people, tend to disturb dogs. And I think we've heard a lot of public comment about.
Okay. Further thoughts from the council? Andy?
I guess I'm conflicted too. I mean, I don't buy fireworks. I used to, and I loved them, and I have dogs, and I have a wife that gets up at 2 a.m. to go to work, so I kind of understand all of the issues with fireworks at night. But I think Angie's right. I think people are going to do what they're going to do, and my guess is while Kalispell has an outright ban and Columbia Falls has an outright ban, I kind of wonder how much usage has really been curtailed as a result of that, and I don't think very much. And I really think as long as they're available in the county and you can drive 5 minutes from downtown right to there, we're just creating a whole lot of extra work for Chief Dial and all of our officers when there's a lot of other things going on. It's a couple of the busiest days that we see for many, 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 many reasons. And my concern is what's going to happen is people are going to call and they're going to go, my neighbor's shooting off fireworks and we're going to be dealing with a crowd at City Beach and we're not going to be able to respond to that call. Maybe tomorrow or the next day or the day after that. And then the police department and City Hall is going to take a beating because we didn't respond to the call. And I don't know, if I thought that it was going to make the problem go away, I guess I would probably support it, but I don't think it will. I really don't. But what I would support, I think, is looking at something that could curtail anything that's of a percussive nature. Sorry, get rid of firecrackers. And the other one that I would support a ban on are anything that launches. Anything that flies high up in the air, because I think those things are the problem, and that's what I call the airborne litter. And we throw that out of our car window and we get a $500 fine from the state. We shoot it out of our lot into our neighbor's yard, and guess what? Everybody cheers. And typically people don't go over and pick it up. You know, so I think that, you know, what I would support is, and this would be an easy thing to do, I think more so on the day after, is if you can't have things that fly away from your property, so you can still have a Roman candle that sits out in the driveway and, you know, makes a nice shower of sparks and all the rest of that. And then we go around with either Parks Department or whoever it is, and anybody that's left stuff out in the street, and just have it be your responsibility. If it's in your block in front of your house, you know what? You get a littering fine. I think there's other ways to maybe deal with some of the bad things, and then keep it at the third and the fourth possibly. You know, just keep it at the third and the fourth and let people do it. But if we could do anything to limit the noise and limit stuff flying around, which also creates more of a potential for fire, in my opinion, and injury both. So that would be maybe something I would support. But anyway, that's my thought.
Okay. Further comments?
I like Andy's tailored approach.
I think there's been a lot of good feedback just in the last couple minutes. I would make a suggestion, and would there be two counselors willing to work with?
Can I just say something to what Andy just said? Sure. And Andy, that's very similar to actually what Bozeman does. I mean, they allow certain fireworks that like produce sparks, but they don't fly off the ground, or that, you know, make it, they don't exceed a height of 15 feet when discharged. But I think we could definitely work to craft it so there's, and I live in a little tiny house with basically no lot lines, and it's terrifying to think that my neighbors would be able to shoot something out that would land on my house. So I definitely think that we could craft that language to find maybe a happier medium.
Keep it so people, it's contained to their site where they're doing it. Knowing full well people still going to, sorry Jake, knowing that people are still going to full well have stuff that's going to fly, and you know, I mean, that's still going to be around because it's still going to be for sale. But that said, I think, you know, people would be responsible, and we'd probably reduce a lot of incidents of issues for people, you know, so that's just.
Chief Dow.
Are you all in agreement, no sonic booms?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, that's for sure. Okay, so I want to make sure that was straight.
So I guess two ways to move forward here. I think there's been a lot of good comments. I agree with everything that was just said. It sounds like we have kind of consensus here. That's probably not enough, that's not clear enough direction, I don't think, to staff to bring something back for the council to consider in terms of the form of an ordinance. Do we want to try to provide that direction here tonight, or the alternative would be for two counselors to volunteer to meet with Angie and Chief Dial separate of this regular council meeting and work on some possible changes reflecting the comments that were just made by the council and bring it back for our consideration? That would be my suggestion, rather than trying to hash that out this evening. Are there two counselors that would volunteer?
I volunteer Andy and me.
Okay. Probably need to keep it to two so we don't deal with quorum issues. So with that said, Andy and Frank, if you're willing and able, I'll let you coordinate with Angie and Chief Dial on that, and hopefully we can see something back here in the next 4 to 8 weeks or so. Does that work for you, Angie? Chief? Thanks very much for the feedback. My only comment tonight is in response to one of the requests that we had at the last meeting from a business owner down on Lupfer between Railway and First. And I've been thinking a lot about this particular business's request. It's a new business. They're taking over the former hostel site, and they're going to be operating basically in, overnight rental, 2 units upstairs along with a cafe or, some form of food service downstairs. And the request that came in was for us to, in formal writing, the request was for us to change the parking, diagonal parking on the west side of Lupfer Avenue. Well, that kind of blossomed into, and we also want the city to consider changing the east side parking to diagonal. And we also want the city to consider changing Lupfer from First and Railway to one-way traffic. I've got a real problem with that. And I've talked with Craig about it, and I think he shares some concerns. But anytime we are addressing traffic and circulation and engineering standards, whether it's downtown or any other location in town for the benefit of one business, I think we're doing a big disservice to our community, in particular that section of town. And I'm not saying we've made that disservice, but I would hope that if that request comes back formally in some form or fashion, that we take a step back and recognize that not too long ago we also commissioned a parking and traffic and circulation study for our downtown specifically, and I think we owe it to that study to carry out and bring back recommendations to this body before we start, making nilly-willy changes to, parking and traffic circulation in our downtown. I'll leave it at that, but I just wanted to share with you my strong opinion on that request that came through at the last meeting. I think we need to hold tight and wait for that downtown parking study to wrap up before we make any suggestions to changes on Lupfer Avenue.
John,
Frank?
Is that study going to incorporate the area in Old Town?
Yes.
Okay, good.
Yep. That's the entire WB3.
Okay, super.
So, if I'm correct, Adam, is that the case? Okay. And do I have staff support in that? I know that I've talked to Craig about it, but okay. Thank you. I just wanted to kind of air my concerns because I don't feel that I adequately did at the last meeting. So with that said, that's all I had tonight. Anything further from staff about the council? We are adjourned. Thanks.